Hey guys and girls, happy October once again. Yeah, pulling a bit of an illusion trick here. So this is going to be our review of Halloween Party from 2020. It's sort of got one of those like festival, then onto streaming type releases. Now, this was a second time watch for me because I originally saw this at Fright Fest in, I think, 2019. Yeah, this is a first time watch for Rachel, so this will be interesting. And just to give the basic premise, this definitely is more on the comedic, satirical side. This movie, there are like horror type moments, and the premise has a horror vibe, but when you watch the film, it definitely becomes clear over the course of the film. Then it's a bit more tongue in cheek, a bit more satirical. This one, in my opinion, anyway. I think that's what they're going for. But the premise of the movie is that it's set at like a high school or a college, if you like, and the premise is of this internet meme where the people who take part in it, it asks them what their fears are, their ultimate fears, and they give it the wrong answer. If they don't tell the truth, then that fear sort of manifests and it ends up getting them as the character of Grace, who her friend gets killed early on in the movie when they're at like work. So then she hunts down this nerdy sort of computer guy called Spencer, and she tracks him down to help her crack the case, find out what exactly is going on. And so over the course of the movie, they're like the two main characters who investigate this thing, and you get like a backstory into like the history of the college type curse, which is spreading a bit like a virus. So what did you think of Halloween
I think
Party?
we're frozen. Oh, there we
Okay,
go.
we're
Sorry,
back.
I lost you for a second there. We're back. We're back. Technical difficulties.
Yeah. That's fitting considering the theme of the movie,
It
isn't
is, isn't it?
it?
I didn't love this movie.
Yeah.
Now it obviously was a lower budget film, which doesn't mean anything. I've seen plenty of low budget films that are perfectly fine. I think an issue I had with this film was I didn't feel like, now that you've mentioned that it was maybe supposed to be more tongue in cheek, maybe if I rewatch it, that
Yeah.
will be a bit better, because I did find this film quite clunky in places, and I feel like at times it didn't quite know what it wanted to do. Like there
Mm.
was a bit of a mix up between things. So, first of all, I do think the pacing was off with this film. I found this film really long, and it's not actually a long film, but like I found that
Yeah.
some of the pacing was like really clunky. Like the opening like scenes before you actually see the title of the movie is like 15-20 minutes long. It's like really long before you actually see the title of the film, and it's like, okay, that was a really long opening. And I think some of
Okay.
the scenes where they were trying to be scary, they dragged the scenes out too long, so it lost whatever scare factor they were trying to do. Like, for example, the scene in the beginning in the mall where her friend is being stalked. I found that scene started out creepy and then went for too long, because I think sometimes when it comes to scares, less is more. And I don't think this film had really figured that out. And I was trying to not be too hard on it, because I could tell that it was made by people who were maybe just getting their foot in the door. And I didn't want to be too harsh, but a lot of this film did really grate on my nerves. I think some of the dialogue was really cringy. What was
Yeah.
that line about? Is this where the roofie party is? Like, what is that? Who wrote that line? Like, some of those frat dudes were just really dumb. And
Yeah.
once we got into the history of the college, like we'll talk about that more as we get into spoilers, but I think there were some unfortunate implications with the backstory that they created, and it
Okay.
didn't always mesh well. Now, one thing that I did find funny was the meme itself reminded me of Halloween 3. Like every time the
Yeah.
meme came up, I just
Okay.
heard the like Halloween
I
3 music, and then I heard
can see
happy,
that.
happy Halloween, and it just kept coming over. So I kind of like that
Yeah.
the meme looked a little old school. Maybe they were trying to pay tribute to that or something like that. I'm not sure. Um, I also didn't find the characters that likable. The main
Right.
chick was
Okay.
okay. She was
Hmm.
okay. I feel like with better writing, she could have been a really good final girl, but she was a bit up and down. And the nerd guy was okay. Again, everything about
Yeah.
this movie to me was just very okay.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
there was nothing particularly offensive about it that made me go, this is a terrible movie and should be burned. But there was nothing like particularly fantastic about it to me either. It was just very okay. What about you? What about your first time watching versus this time? Did you find differences?
I was going to say, yeah, this, because I think what tends to happen is because I saw this at a festival, and I think around a festival like Fright Fest and stuff, there tends to be this certain atmosphere and this sense of fun, and
Yeah,
you
of
just,
course.
generally speaking, you go into a screening wanting to have a good time
Yeah.
regardless, and sometimes if it is like a weaker film, sometimes that can paper over the cracks and you actually have more fun with it. And I think that happened with this because I am more with you on this viewing. I mean, when I first saw it, I wasn't necessarily in love with it, but I did think it was a solid film and quite enjoyable. And I still think it's pretty watchable now. And there are certain things I like about it, but yeah, I was edging more towards this is pretty forgettable. This is
Mm.
pretty mediocre without, like you said, without being terrible. I think there's certain things where, because of the budget limitations, then there are definitely scenes that are really bad, and there are certain moments that just the low budget stands out. And maybe because they're being a bit more tongue in cheek, certain things don't matter as much. But some of the horror moments did stand out as being bad just because they didn't really have enough of a budget to do
Yeah.
much better. And
Mm.
like you said, I think some scenes were drawn out too much. Standard of acting was pretty bad
Yeah.
outside of the leads, who I thought were decent. I think, like
They were
you,
not too bad. Yeah.
yeah, the girl especially, the girl I actually liked the most. So the leads were okay, solid enough. The girl was quite, yeah, quite, likable and
Mm.
watchable. But yes, some of the supporting cast were really bad. Like there's a scene I'm thinking of in the classroom at some point, and it's quite early in the film. It's around the time where things are starting to go down, and it's the character of Bubbles when he sort
Oh,
of has his,
bubbles.
but the acting in that scene is really terrible when they're like reacting to things. And
Yes, when he's reacting to the guy outside who's following him, but
yeah.
it's like the most hammy, over the top kind of like, yeah, like D grade horror acting.
Yeah, and I think part the trouble with this sort of film where they haven't quite got the right balance with this stuff
Mm.
is I think it stands out then obviously. So part of the fun with this film and part of the satire, I think, is then it's just sending up, these very douchey, sort of, preppy, privileged type characters in general. And
Mm.
so a lot of times when you're watching the scene in the movie, you do actually believe the characters. You kind of say, okay, yeah, that they sort of seem like a college student. They seem like
Yeah.
quite a preppy, whatever. And I sort of believe in them. But the problem is you need that balance of them being interesting to watch as well. And you need a bit more of a personality to the characters. And
Yeah,
I just thought the
definitely.
characters, mostly in this movie, were all pretty one note and
Yeah.
bland. And there was no, because the acting in general was pretty bad, there wasn't a lot to lift any of the characters. The humor I did enjoy, like I did actually enjoy the opening scene and the setup with the two girls in the room. I thought there was some good humor in that. When
Yeah.
they're joking about, like, birds of freedom and stuff on like the prison type paintings, and there were some good lines with them, and they played off each other quite well, a bit like a sketch show, a bit with the humor where it
Yeah,
was like
definitely.
you would come across and there were a few really funny jokes and good lines, but then over time it started to grate a bit, and it
Yeah.
became more inconsistent, and it did feel like a sketch type show where, you know, some of it was always going to be better than others, and
Yeah.
it sort of feels a little bit, although obviously in a way this is like a good idea for a movie, it did feel a bit like it was a short movie that was extended to feature
Yes.
length, and
Yes.
they
I
just didn't
agree.
have the overall plot to carry this out.
Yeah.
I didn't find it particularly scary. That there was a
No.
couple of, eerie sort of scenes. I mean, I remember a scene with a mannequin that was quite freaky
Yeah.
because hey, mannequins are
Well,
freaky.
mannequins.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So when you're in the dark with a mannequin, that is going to be
Yeah, that's
quite
not cool.
scary.
Yeah.
But I agree with you in some of those scenes. So that scene very late on in the movie where they're just in the dark. I think
Yeah.
early in the scene there is a little bit of suspense, but they
It
definitely
also
drag it out a bit too much.
Plus, it also feels that, like, at the climax of the film, they suddenly change what they're doing with the camera, and for like 5 minutes or so, it suddenly becomes like a found footage film almost. Like that's the
True,
feel,
yeah.
and it's like, what are you doing? You can't just throw a new subgenre into your movie and think that it's going to like work with the rest of them because it was so weird. All of a sudden, I'm like, I feel like I'm watching the Blair Witch Project. All of a sudden, I mean, a bad version of it, but that's how it felt. I
Mm,
mean, all of a sudden, it just switched back to the normal camera, and it was like, oh, okay, we're back to Steadicam. Like, what is happening? So I feel like you said, I think your description of it being a short film that got extended is perfect because I do feel like if you chopped maybe half an hour off this film, it would make it a more succinct film and a bit tighter and a little bit, the
yeah.
pacing would have been better, things like that. I also found, and I don't know if you found this, but like, so obviously this was all linked to like this meme, right? But the explanation from where the meme came from to me was not satisfying. So we end up finding out that, so we're into spoilers now, guys.
Yeah.
So we end up finding out that the college used to be a palliative care place for kids. So for anyone who doesn't know, palliative care is basically care until you're dying. It's not exactly hospice. It's just managing your symptoms until you eventually pass on. And that apparently there was some toxic leak or something like that, and a bunch of babies were born called bubble babies that were like deformed, and like the kids were deformed, and there was like some kid with no limbs and another kid with no skin and
Yeah.
another kid. And again, this made me feel a little uncomfortable because I was at the point, I'm like, aren't we at the point where we are going to stop villainizing disfigured and different people? Because the explanation was they kept the kids inside and the kids got so angry and the kids were in so much pain and they were going to die that they just became monsters. And it's like, okay, can we stop villainizing deformed people? Like, I feel like this is treading into not great territory. And the
Okay.
explanation was that they left them alone in a computer room, and that's how the meme originated. And it's like, it didn't feel like the backstory matched the meme, if you know what I mean. Like, I feel like the backstory for the meme
Yeah.
should have been something else, not a bunch of like disfigured kids who just happened to create it on a computer. Like, I thought it was actually going to be like a hacker or someone who actually had computer knowledge or someone looking for revenge. I thought that it was going to be more technology related, but it turned out to not be. And then, the whole thing of like they bricked them in, like they bricked the kids into the asylum floorboards. It is messed up, man.
That's
And
that's a little bit anticlimactic, and
yeah,
it's, I think sometimes certain scenes are just too on the nose because it's like the very end of that final scene, like literally you get computer sparks or something, don't you, coming from that thing where
yeah,
they literally trap them in, and it's like, yeah,
uh-huh.
they're hitting you in the face a bit with this stuff. It's like,
Yeah, and
yeah,
then yeah, and they
yeah,
do a bit of a predictable like twist, so to speak, which is pretty much like The Ring, which is basically like, don't release them because we boarded them in for a reason. So now that you've released
yeah.
them, they're free. And then there was a really weird end scene on an airplane with spiders and a bear that just somehow turned up on the
I
airplane.
mean that scene I quite enjoyed. I mean that scene was one where it was just an entertaining,
That
fun,
was just
hammy time,
bizarre.
and I like that scene just because I like the idea of her actually literally getting on a plane, like hightailing it out of the
True.
country, and it's like, yeah, because poor Spence didn't make it, did he? He ended up,
No,
no,
he didn't make it out of the
that
the
was
tunnel.
a bit unclear, but no,
I was a bit unclear about
yeah,
that
they
too.
didn't
Like,
make that totally clear, did they?
yeah, when she got on the plane at the end, I was like, "Where's the nerd boy? What happened to a nerd boy?"
Yeah.
Because I was like, "Did he die? Did that?" And this is another thing about this movie is it doesn't clarify everything. You know, you're left with some questions like, was it really pig people that came after her friend in the beginning?
Yeah.
And you know, just stuff like that. I think maybe if you stripped away all of the crap that's in the movie and you went with the bare bones of the story, it's an interesting story. It's an interesting idea, I think. But I don't think it was executed very well. And I'm trying not to be too harsh again, because I know this was a lower budget film and it was probably made by more amateur filmmakers. But again, I've seen lower budget films made by amateur filmmakers that are still really good. So that's not always an excuse. But I just, I think there were problems with pacing. Like you said, I didn't find it scary, like really at all. Some of the imagery was a bit disturbing. There was one particular image of, I think it was the kid who was inside out, who reminded me of the Chatterer from Hellraiser. They had the teeth.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
And it reminded me a bit of that. So some of the imagery was a bit disturbing, but again, I think because it was low budget, I think when you have low budget, less is more, and you do better scaring people with what you don't see rather than what you do see. Because what you do see when you have a low budget is usually pretty cheesy, and I do think that some of the effects in this were,
didn't it? Like, the practical effects weren't very good at time, and
no. So I think overall, like I said, I wouldn't call it a terrible movie, but I definitely wouldn't say it was that good either. I don't think it's one that I would watch again.
Okay.
But like I said, there wasn't anything in it that like truly offended me, and I thought this is so crap, this is terrible, it should not be allowed. It wasn't bad to that extent. It just wasn't very good, at least not in my mind.
Yeah, and I think probably just because we read it a bit differently. Like I did read it as a bit more of a satire, tongue in cheek, what have you. Then maybe that's why I'm a bit more generous on it than you. So maybe the fact that the horror scenes didn't work as well isn't so much of a problem. But having said that, even the humor I think is very hit and miss. Like you said, there are some funny lines. And it is watchable enough. It's quite a short watch and it goes in pretty easy. But yeah, I do agree some of the humor was very cringe as well and on the nose. So I think the strongest stuff for me is some of the humor and the relationship with the central, but they're decent enough to watch.
Yeah, I thought they were okay, and they worked okay together. I thought they had okay chemistry. It didn't feel like forced or anything, but it
it was
a
Mulder and Scully type vibe to them,
which
a
little bit like
enjoyed.
that.
Yeah, but so that's the strongest stuff. The horror stuff for me mostly didn't work. It wasn't really that suspenseful, and really, they could have done more with the premise.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So, definitely.
So I think we've summed it up pretty well. If you want to rate Halloween Party,
I'd probably go with, probably about a 5. I don't think it was fantastic. I don't think it was terrible. 5 is pretty average. I might drop that down to a 4 if I was feeling mean. But, there were some okay moments. There were some okay moments of like characterization, and I did like the kind of investigative angle that she and the nerd guy kind of went on. I thought that was a fun, like you said, kind of Mulder and Scully thing. But overall, this film really didn't leave a good impression on me, and I think it had more flaws than it had good parts. So I'll go straight down the middle. I'll go 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm thinking similar. I think probably when I watched it the first time, the rating would have been a little bit higher, but I think this does belong in that middle of the road type territory. So I'll echo that. I'll go 5 out of 10 as well.
Nice.
So there you have it. So that's our review of Halloween Party. If you've seen the movie, then let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. And obviously for the whole month of October, we're doing movie reviews all through the month. Also a special list video we have to mark the month. and various other things. I'll also be doing live streams throughout the month, so lots of things to look forward to in October. But before we go, Rachel, if you want to plug your channel.
Guys, you can follow me, Rachel McDonald, video essays covering TV shows and movies. I also have my Tumblr and my Twitter account linked in my channel, and Keith usually puts a link in the description. So come and follow me everywhere. I will hopefully have some stuff up for Halloween. Love October, best month of the year. So come follow me for Halloween goodness.
Okay, thanks guys. Take care, and we'll see you again soon. Goodbye.